Amanda is joining us here on the phone to tell us why. Hello, Amanda.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning to you. Well, good afternoon now, 12:35.
Yeah. Right.
How are you? Are you okay?
Very well, lovely sunny day.
I know, it's fantastic. So tell us,
Yeah.
Amanda, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to crowdfund to produce these images of the first images of the human brain on LSD?
Well, really, my aim is to open up the best scientific research into how psychedelics work in the brain. And the reason for wanting to do that is that they have historically been used as amazing medications. And there's good evidence from the 50s and 60s that we could use these substances to treat otherwise intractable illnesses. And I think we're depriving patients by not researching how they work. So it's been my intention for many, many years to open up the doors of research. And finally, it is really, beginning to become acceptable. And we're currently doing the first LSD study in human subjects using brain imaging technology. And one can learn a great deal about seeing what changes come about in the brain and correlating it with the subjective changes of the participants' experience.
And when will you get the full results? And what do you anticipate that you will find of the potential health benefits of taking LSD?
Well, we've already done a certain amount of research with psilocybin, which has shown very definite potential benefits. And LSD is fairly closely related to psilocybin, so one will expect similar type of effects. But I'm sure each different compound will have its particular signature. And LSD, when it first was invented by Albert Hofmann, a Swiss chemist, in 1943, it was held as a kind of an amazing breakthrough. And there was something like 3,000 papers written on it and several conferences given on it. And there was a lot of excitement in the medical world. But then that became overridden by the excessive use of it in the recreational market, which, as we all know, put a terrible taboo on it, which has lasted for over 50 years. But I'm hoping that finally that will be overcome.
Do you think that the taboo on this is a part of the so-called war on drugs?
Very definitely. I mean, it's all interrelated. The war on drugs evolved out of the recreational use of psychoactive substances in the 60s and was actually vastly overplayed compared with other dangers in the world. And over the last 50 years, the war on drugs has done much more damage to society and caused much more suffering than the actual drugs themselves. And finally, I think, people who are looking at society and things are beginning to realize that this is a fact. And what I've been doing through the Beckley Foundation for the last 16 years is producing a scientific evidence base of how we can best minimize harms and protect health through the regulation and control of how we use these substances. Because obviously by just a carpet prohibition, it doesn't work, because people have always changed their consciousness and are always going to. And it's much better not to put them in the hands of criminals, but to keep them in the hands of governments and experts and try to regulate them in such a way that it minimizes the harms that happens through them and indeed enables the many benefits which can also be produced by their use to be able to bear fruit. And that means using them in medical setting where, like in depression, it's very difficult to treat depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, terminally ill patients, anxiety of dying. There's many, many, many areas where these substances are very likely to be beneficial when used in the right situation and in the right way.
Given that you feel that the war on drugs has been such a failure, do you anticipate the war on drugs coming to an end, and when?
Well, I actually think that the intellectual battle has been won. I think most thinking people now realize that the war on drugs is not the right approach to this worldwide issue, that it's creating war zones of Latin America, and now West Africa, and the Caribbean, and Afghanistan. These countries which either produce or are transit are being converted into war zones for the appetites of the consumer countries, i.e. America and Europe and Australia, the richer countries. And it really isn't right to impose this terrible suffering on the countries, the transit and producer countries. And it would be much better if we learned how to regulate the production, transit, and consumption. And obviously each drug has a very different character, and also each product of the drug. I mean, like opium is different from heroin. Coca leaf is different from cocaine or crack. The old-fashioned cannabis is different from the new skunk. And so we need to not have one blanket prohibitional system. We need to nuance how we regulate them according to their harms and try to encourage people, if they're going to use the safer substances and safer methods of use, and not be ruled by political agenda, but be ruled by science and common sense, basically. And I think that is breaking through finally.
And did you? I'm interested to know how you became so interested in LSD and the uses of LSD in medical use. Was it? Did you take LSD yourself and realise the powers?
Yes, in the 60s. I was introduced to LSD. I studied comparative religions and mysticism at Oxford, and with a man who'd written a kind of definitive book on the experience of mystical experience and LSD. And then when I tried it in 1965, I realized, my goodness me, this can produce the experience of the mystical experience, which is fairly amazing, the kind of unification with the universe and wonderful feelings of compassion and love and those experiences of humanity which we love and respect. And also it's a completely non-toxic substance. You can't kill someone with overdose in LSD like you can in every other drug, more or less. I mean, not the psychedelics, but in tobacco or heroin, they all have not a very big window between use and between a fatal dose, whereas LSD is non-toxic and therefore doesn't kill anyone. It can be used, you can very subtly control the dose so that people hardly notice it, or so that they do notice it in different degrees. And I just think that it has gained for itself, because of a whole history of events which had really nothing to do with the harms of the drugs itself, this terrible satchel of terror, and which has blinded us to the possible benefits of using it carefully and in the right circumstances. And I think our scientific exploration of how it works in the brain will hopefully start opening the doors to a better understanding of its potential usefulness.
But there must be potential negatives too, alongside the positives. I mean, I'm imagining paranoia, psychosis about using LSD. What are they, and how would you go about avoiding them in your medical use?
I think in medical use, one can very definitely avoid it by, careful having, in a medical experiment, one would always have a doctor present, and one would know what dose to give, and if anyone did have a paranoid and bad reaction, one can give a counteracting antipsychotic to stop the experience. But it isn't of itself dangerous, but it can cause traumatic reactions in vulnerable people, and therefore, and as it is potentially a very strong substance in a larger dose, it shouldn't be used at all in ignorance, quite obviously. But it is very safe in medicinal terms in the sense that it is non-toxic. So obviously it must be used in very carefully controlled circumstances if one is doing research into it. And that obviously is what we do at Imperial, where we're now doing our brain imaging.
And so finally, what are you at the Beckley Foundation looking for? Your crowdfunding, where can people find out about this? That can be reached on the wallacea.com. How do you spell that?
It's very difficult to spell, I quite agree. Luckily I got it in front of me. WALACEA.com. And it's also on the Beckley Foundation .org website. And we were delighted with the enthusiasm of the response of the public to our research. And we actually got the sum that we were initially looking for, which was quite modest, but we got it within, I think it was about 24 hours. And we've had an enormous response. And it just shows that there is a big crowd of people out there who realize that this research should be done. And the problem is, the Beckley is also starting a campaign, I'm doing this with Dave Nutt, a campaign for scientists for change. Science shouldn't be controlled by political expediency. And at the moment, this affects the world in very serious ways. For instance, 80% of the population of the world, has no painkillers. I mean, it's hard to believe, but that is the case, and that's because of the war on drugs. So 80% of the world has to suffer in silence or just put up with that pain. And that's an appalling imposition to put on people. And the other thing which the war on drugs actually stops is scientific research. It's not meant to stop it, and the UN declaration says that the scientific research should be permitted. But the actual fact is that scientists don't want to touch it, the institutions don't want to touch it, and there's no funding. And that's why I set up the Beckley Foundation in 1998 to overcome this problem and, raise little sums of money with which to start pilot studies which can show how these substances work in the brain and how they might be of an enormous value to humanity. And I think that's now beginning to gather momentum. And, I personally, with the Beckley Foundation, work at about 20 institutions around the world in different studies with different substances. And there are several other bodies like the Beckley Foundation. So we are slowly building up a ground of knowledge about how these substances work.
Great.
And where they might be beneficial.
That's wonderful. Amanda, thank you for your time. I've got to go. Time is pressing, but I wish you the best with your campaign. And
well, thank you very much. And anyone who would like, please visit either the Beckley Foundation or the Wallacea website and think of donating any sum from £5 upwards, with enormously appreciated.
There you go. Thank you very much, Amanda Feilding there from the Beckley Foundation. I'm still here with Simon G. Powell, who is who's an author on the use of psilocybin. What did you think to what Amanda said there?
Yeah, well, it's true. They have a. It's hard to over these taboos that are stopping research and stopping the use of. Because psilocybin and other psychedelics like LSD have a tremendous potential on the collective human, to improve the collective human lot